I appreciate those who've showed up today to attend what I think is the last and final committee hearing of the Retroactive ER Study Committee. I really appreciate it. Again, there's some noticeable absences in the room here um, regarding this issue. Today's agenda should be short, um, and we'll all get home. But the first item on the agenda, I had been talking to, and some folks had been talking to Representative Schofield on some issues that she had, and I'd like for Representative Schofield to sort of tell us about some of her experiences uh, in regards to insurance. I know it, Representative, we talked about it. I know it's not necessarily cued straight in on the ER retroactive issue, but I think it speaks in a larger way to the issue and maybe some of the from Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, with that, Representative Schofield, if you don't mind sharing your experience and maybe even a little bit of background, it was very interesting to know your background and uh, a wealth of information.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman. I am Representative Kim Schofield. I came to the General Assembly 10 years ago by way of being an advocate for the chronic disease known as lupus. Lupus is a disease that affects every major system in your body. And being diagnosed in 2000, I, over the years, started a support group and aligned with the Lupus Foundation, the Georgia chapter, and then realized that there just wasn't enough resources done. So I came down to the Capitol talking to legislators and spending time building relationships to educate my colleagues now about lupus. So I come from the perspective of I know what it's like to be in pain. I know what it's like to live in pain, and I know what it's like to have resources or lack of resources from both the medical and personal side. As a person, and I'll disclose this because I don't mind sharing, but as a person who lived the American dream, had the car, the child in private school. 3 years after living with lupus, I was in the first 6 months. I was told I didn't look sick, and I lost my job and lost all my health insurance. I also, within 2 years, had to file medical bankruptcy. I say that because I spent most days in ERs, and at that time, having lost my health insurance, I was in just that space where we find many people that live with chronic illness. As I became in this space as a legislator and being an advocate for people that lived it, there were times I was able to. I started working for Emory University as a lupus researcher, and I did have adequate health insurance. But what I found that the policies and the coverage and the treatment that I was being given in the emergency room was just as challenging as not having health insurance. It was the lack of transparency on the bills. And now these are prior histories that are going to lead up to a current situation. But I can remember specifically in 2000 and 2012 being at the emergency room with chest pains, and I had a bad migraine. And my chest pains were so bad that I thought I was having a heart attack. I have a history of a pulmonary embolism, which is why I have to make sure that whatever minimal symptom that I have, and I hate doctors, and I hate sitting in emergency rooms. So if I get to that point where I feel like I have no choice, I have to go. I spent 6 hours down there waiting for help, waiting for some resolve, only to be told after they checked, and I had Blue Cross Blue Shield, only they checked out my insurance and said, they came back and said, you may want to go to another hospital. I was at Emory, and told me I may want to go seek other treatment outside of Emory because the insurance company, we're having a problem with your insurance company wanting to cover. They don't think that you should have been down here for this. It's not. I'm like, what is it, not big enough? So I said, so if I fall out now and I prove that I had a heart attack, you'll cover everything. And I was an Emory employee that paid for health insurance. And this is one of many things. And the constituents that I serve that live with lupus, and there's 60,000 people in Georgia that are impacted by lupus, have stories like this of being not only just bullied, but being left in a quandary of how do policies and people how do they detach and do not meet the needs of the people that we're paying these premiums, high premiums on. And I think I can get past that until I get a little current. So recently in June of this year, I was having some challenges with a pain in my lower back. And I figured after session was over, I'll go, we're so busy, we're taking care of everybody else. But you figure after session, you'll go check in on your own self. And so I went to work that day, and I just noticed I just wasn't feeling myself. For the last couple of weeks, I was having migraines, but I was kept pushing through. I get to work, and I start getting dizzy, and I work. My office is down over at Grady. I'm on the 12th floor in the lupus clinic. And it was a bad day. And so all of a sudden, I started feeling nauseous. And that's not like me. So I said to one of my colleagues, I said, I'm not feeling well. And so one of the docs said, hey, after I look at a patient, I'll come in there and check in on you. I said, okay. But 5 minutes after that, I began to get nauseous, which is very unlikely for me. So I knew something was wrong. So I called another doc in there. I said, listen, I'm nauseous. Something's going on. She checked my blood pressure, and immediately her face lost color. And she said, Kim, you are at stroke level. And I said, what? She said, you're at stroke level, honey. I don't know what's going on. I was like, I told, she said, we got to get you in the emergency room right now. And she went and got the other doctor and rheumatologist, and they treat me for my lupus. And again, he's my boss and my rheumatologist, so I have a great situation there. But I went, and I did leave and went to Emory because that's where all my docs were. I get there, and they treated me. And prior to this, I had been calling, trying to get an appointment with an orthopedic doctor, and it was 3 months out. The pain was so severe. What had happened is it was attacking my body, and I didn't know I was in that level of pain was so severe. So it shot my blood pressure up and put me at a dangerous level for stroke. They stabilized me. I ended up leaving within, I think I was there the night they kept me, and then I left. I followed up with the orthopedic doctor, and it was then determined that the best course of treatment was that I would get steroid injections, a nerve blocker. Let's see what that does. Setting it up, I'm not a person that wants needles. So if I'm telling you I'm going to get a needle, then I'm at my wit's end. I'm begging you now. Well, what happened was 3 days before we were going in, I got a letter about the prior authorization that said that my treatment had been denied, that Blue Cross and Blue Shield Anthem had denied. And so I called and I said, what do you mean? They said the insurance company is not paying for this. They said that you need to go 6 weeks to go to physical therapy. Physical therapy? Do you understand that I was in the emergency room about to have a stroke because my body is not processing the pain? When you live with lupus every day, you're in pain. It's like waking up every day and having the worst flu ever. So that's what I deal with every day. So my brain doesn't process pain on a certain level. When you're telling me it's starting to affect other systems in my body, but then tell me I have to go 6 weeks for physical therapy, you're not listening to what I'm saying. The guy on the other end is not, he's just reading the script. If you have to do this first. So I called back the orthopedic doctor. He said, yeah, they denied it. I did a peer-to-peer review. The medical doctor reviewed it and denied it. I said, I have a pre-existing condition. I know. I called Blue Shield back again. You can't talk to anybody over there. It's just impossible. So they said, I explained the situation. I said, I want to talk to somebody who's ever had a headache. Can you just give me that? And so I talked to them, and they said, well, get me some more information. We need something from your rheumatologist. My rheumatologist wrote a long statement. They denied him again. So that's two denials. Then I'm sitting there while you're telling me that I have to do 6 weeks. They're the clinicians. They understand the best course of treatment for me. And you, as an insurance company, have made a decision to tell me that that's not good enough. Go let someone push on spots and maneuver and everything. No. So I called back again. They denied it again. So here I am sitting at this degree of pain. I'm trying to walk. It is difficult to get out of the bed every day. And so I'm just toying. So my rheumatologist, he says, Kim, what are you going to do? I said, I have no idea. I'm going to have to live with this. I don't know what to do. You know, should I go back to the emergency room and just keep racking up bills? That's not the answer. I don't know if there's nothing over the counter that I should be taking. This has to get resolved. So I sat there and I just was at my wit's end, to be honest. And imagine being told that there is an option, but yet a person that's reading a script is denying you access to care, and you don't feel like you can do anything about that. So I ended up calling the lobbyist, and I'm going to be honest. This was my word to him. I said, listen, I'm calling you first because I just want you to know where my narrative is. That your company client made a decision about my health care despite what my two physicians have said, specialists have said, that has denied me access to getting the treatment I need so that I can do my job as the person I was elected to do. I was elected to do a job, and you are stopping me. And he said, hold on, Representative Schofield. We hold on a minute. Let me see what I can do. Within a couple of hours, he called me and said the chief medical officer, had decided that they were going to approve the shot. Now, you think by that time I'd be excited and say, wow, I can get some relief. But imagine the people that don't have access to having to make a phone call. That I'm walking around with this level of pain because someone made a decision about my health care. You bullied me and forced me to make choices. These are your own policies. They had to review the medical. These are so you looked at, when you got the case, you looked at chief medical officer examined it. You had all the data there.
And I think that's where this is where this is so relevant, not even as it ties back into what the ER issue is. And then I'm going to make a comment about how it ties into the bigger picture. You know, specifically, we've got a situation where under the ER policy, as far as we understand it, because again, this body has asked for a copy of the policy, and we cannot, even under open records, get it. We were given the affidavit that it's confidential and proprietary, all right? But it goes back to the codes and examining the data, and that a medical director will then look into the issue, all right, and apply the whatever review process. And it doesn't matter whether it's an ER or whether it's in a prior authorization. This calls into question that if in my mind, it calls into question that if there was a review process by a medical examiner who twice denied physicians, okay, but all of a sudden within a matter of hours, a lobbyist could call a medical examiner and get the issue reversed. Are the procedures correct? Is what the medical examiner is doing correct? Are their policies correct? Are they applying them correctly? Nobody knows. Nobody knows because you can't see what they do. It's proprietary and confidential. There's no transparency whatsoever.
None.
In the healthcare system.
Right.
And that is, I think that's why your testimony and when we talked, I thought it was so relevant to what we were hearing today. That, Representative, we could go on and talk about this for a long time, but how much time was wasted by the physicians who were writing, had to sit down, take time out of seeing patients to write a narrative for an appeals process.
Right. And working in this field, I hear it every day that they're
Yeah.
taking too much time out of their day
Yeah.
for appeals.
Yeah. And instead of providing health care, they're dealing with, the roadblocks, if I would call it, the delay, dismiss, deny tactics. That is what, I thought was so appealing with this, because it not only speaks to the bigger issue of what I think is unscrupulous or unfair practices that quite frankly are not in the best interest of the patient. So I thought that the members of this committee and the public ought to hear what Representative Schofield, her experience was, because I think she adds a real personal narrative and some personal experience to this that is necessary. With that, committee members, any questions on this and how this is coming back into this study?
I would, I've been in
What-
discussions.
what Lee- what- What number? 7.
7, yeah. I've been in discussions with Northeast Georgia, obviously, about this. It's been an ongoing concern with them. And I'll just tell you, I was on staff there for about 10 years and did my oral surgery training at Emory, at Grady quite a bit, and the Veterans Hospital. So I've sort of been on the other side of the door, and I'll just tell you, we don't know what's going on with the patient until we examine a patient on the inside. We don't deny seeing patients. It's not our purview to do that. We're there to treat patients. So, and by the Impala Act, when someone shows up in the emergency room, they're seen. Now, I can understand why Blue Cross Blue Shield is concerned about frivolous emergency room visits, and that needs to be addressed in certain ways. I know that we've had ambulances come in at Northeast Georgia with folks carrying folks that just didn't want to wait for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours in the hospital emergency room. But I can tell you that it is becoming more and more critical as far as emergency room treatment. Northeast Georgia sees anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 people a month. I had a back issue about a month and a half ago when I actually went to the emergency room myself, and there were at least 300 or 400 people there. And I mean, it looked like a movie with MASH. People, the kid in a wheelchair passed out, there in the hall. So the thing I would say to this issue is each member of this committee, if you could follow up with your own hospital. Northeast Georgia is more than willing to have us up there and do a tour of the emergency room, and you can go back and actually see how things occur. I think it would give everybody an insight, appreciable insight of what we're discussing here. Not that you need to go all the way to Gainesville to do it. I'm sure if you call the CEO of your hospitals in your area, they'd be more than welcome you to do a tour, and you can see for yourself what it is. But I think the issue again here is that hospitals cannot deny patients coming in the emergency room. But after the fact, the insurance companies are denying paying for that.
Yep.
I think that puts in the present day thought process of many patients that, well, I don't owe this bill, my insurance company does. Some of that's going to have to be rearranged, and the patient's going to have to understand, yeah, if they don't pay, you're responsible. But again, I think it'd be beneficial. I know we're upon Christmas, and our report's going to be due. But even after that point, if you could go to the hospital yourself and just see what's going on, I think it would be beneficial.
Representative Hawkins, I appreciate it. That's what I would charge the committee, and I actually talked to Representative Schofield prior to the meeting. I would hope that we would all go back. We would all start to listen out for stories or go to our hospitals or our doctors and listen out for this, because I think this is much more prevalent. And the more we discuss it, I think the more this issue rises to the surface, and we get more and more examples of exactly these policies. And again, I want to sort of close on this, and I'm gonna leave this open for some public comment in the end. But I scheduled this meeting in good faith to make sure that Blue Cross and Blue Shield had one more opportunity to be heard and give them one more opportunity to come in and help this committee understand what this committee was charged with through the resolution. And via that resolution, this House found that retroactive emergency room policies, are contributing to medical debt of Georgians. They're conflicting with the goals of access to care across the state. And quite frankly, it's putting patients who don't have a healthcare literacy, an average healthcare literacy, they don't understand what a doctor stands. It's putting these patients in jeopardy because it's calling on them to make medical decisions for which, they are not qualified. And on top of that, the prudent layperson standards it dictates what a prudent person would think in that situation. So these insurance companies are making, in essence, making us self-diagnose. This House was charged this committee to study these practices and policies that are now being currently implemented in various emergency room departments throughout the state, to determine if any action by the state is necessary to mitigate this problem. Unfortunately, once again, Blue Cross and Blue Shield has chosen to stay home. And quite frankly, I don't see them in this room anywhere. An invitation has been extended to Blue Cross Blue Shield not once, but twice, but 3 times. They know about these meetings. And despite administering benefits for the state health benefit patients, state Medicaid patients through affiliated companies like Amerigroup and commercial patients, apparently there is no one qualified in Georgia to speak to these policies. Once again, I remind you of the first meeting that we came. We had asked them to show up, and what was the response? Our medical director is with Anthem in Missouri, and we would have to fly him out. Is there not a medical director in the state of Georgia that could come and talk to this committee in regards to this process? Apparently, we've got to travel out to Missouri if they're not willing to come here. But despite asking them for their policies and records, they've provided nothing, save a copy of a last-minute court order on an emergency injunction request. Guys, I'll remind you, in the first hearing, I submitted under the Open Records, Georgia Open Records Act, a request for information from the Insurance Commissioner's Office for a policy, for their policy that they submitted to the Insurance Commissioner. And again, I'll remind you of that day I showed you the affidavit stating that that information was proprietary and confidential. Again, there's no transparency. There's no willingness for anybody outside of that organization to help you understand what their policies are and how they're applied. Because of their refusal to provide policies and other information in an effort to meet the mission of this committee, we've had to resort to open records requests, I just told you about, and then we were thwarted because of the trade secret. And so here we are, we're left with more questions than answers. And it's sad because we're here to represent Georgians, and they deserve better. And again, this policy is affecting a lot of people. There was a Senate in your packets. There was a U.S. Senate hearing. I think it was Senator McCaskill actually had a hearing, and I think there's over 5,000 patients that came out that were denied retroactively denied coverage. Again, this isn't 1 or 2 issues. This isn't 1 or 2 examples. This was over 5,000, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Yeah. Claims, let me see here. Reviewed and denied in Georgia is 3,500. And they actually pulled 6,500 that were reviewed and then approved. So this is a very intense review process that policy that they've implemented. And that was just between July of 17 and December of 17. That was a 6-month period. This is not a small issue. But I'll tell you what I've learned from this. We do have a few answers. Blue Cross and Blue Shield has no interest in coming and partnering with the state to look at these issues. Despite having a consistent and powerful presence at Georgia's Capitol through the legislative session, they somehow could not find their way here during the study committee. It's funny because they walked the halls of the Capitol every day during the session. In particular, they were unwilling to help the House look into these issues because they sure get a lot from our state. I'll remind you that they contract and subcontract with the state every chance they get, and they profit from it greatly. Yet they're not here. They thumb their nose at the state, and particularly at the legislative body, who is also has our responsibility to appropriate those state dollars back to those contracts that they so covet. While this started as a narrow focus on Blue Cross Blue Shield retroactive policies, the big takeaway that I see is that this state needs to look closer at its relationship with the contractor that, quite frankly, has gone way out of its way not to participate in this study committee. And they only come in and engage this legislature when they stand to gain something. It's funny, in my research, we found that their tentacles in Georgia are immense. A dizzying maze of corporate entities. I think you'll see in your packet a sheet where we pulled from the Secretary of State's office. If you look at it, all of the Anthem Blue Cross family of insurance companies in Georgia. How many are there? And life insurance. It's sort of funny. You start to see there's basically two people that are registered as CFO and secretary of all those entities. But yet they hide behind the corporate veils all the time, when in essence they're one and the same. Again, there's no transparency whatsoever in regards to how Blue Cross and Blue Shield, or in this case, I guess Anthem now, that are they rebranding and consolidating, I think, in Georgia, how they do business. We don't know who their subsidiaries are and they're registered to. They seemingly are doing business all over the state again. And based on their pattern of conduct here, I believe that every one of these affiliated entities need to be scrutinized because they're all one and the same. And again, why can't Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Georgia show up instead of having to call somebody from Missouri to come and testify? Apparently that's where their policy is being made. Their insurance companies, their HMOs, and their Medicaid managed care organizations, and their soon-to-be PBM, okay? They're creating their own PBM. Their contracts with their state. Don't need to be any more secrets, no more shadows. It's time for some sunlight. It's time for the state and its agency to take a hard look at how we trust to care, or who we trust to care for the Georgians that are up under our purview that we're here to take care of. Because from where I'm sitting, it quite frankly looks like that these policies are only there, and they're only looking out to benefit themselves and not the patients, who ultimately that's who they are there for. With that, I'll end my remarks, and I'll take any comments from the committee or from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it's an honor to sit on this committee, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit and learn more about sort of, at this particular point, a bad actor in the state of Georgia. To my colleague, Kim, thanks for your very powerful testimony. And it really is eye-opening, not just because of the constituents that I serve, but it becomes a lot more personal when you have a colleague who's going through it, and really because you have a modicum of power, we're able to get treatment. But I think about those Georgians who don't have that kind of access. And to not have a person or a group in this committee to answer some tough questions, it doesn't speak very highly of that organization. And so, Mr. Chairman, once again, thanks for allowing me and to be a part of this committee, and more importantly, for it to be a very eye-opening experience about things that we can do in this legislature to make sure that those who don't have power have access and can be treated fairly. So thanks again.
Appreciate the member's service on this. I'm gonna, there's some drafts. We're starting to draft the report. I'll send that out for, the committee's consideration, comment, any ideas that you've got. But we'll hopefully get this report done here in the next week or so, and get it turned in, and hopefully this will allow us to go forward in this session, is maybe look for opportunities to address this issue, or I think in a bigger way address the whole issue of this non-transparent world in which particularly Blue Cross Blue Shield Anthem lives in, but all of the insurance, to make sure that there is transparency across the board in what we do. So with that, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I appreciate it, and we are done.